Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Now, following on from the Mail on Sunday story about Mike Veal and his belief that the allegations against Edward Heath are true, the Mail ran another story today about a group of women who say that they were abused by Heath, that they witnessed satanic rituals, and they also accused their parents of being involved in up to 16 murders. That was in the Mail today. If you don't know where those stories are, if you don't want to go looking for them on the Mail's website, go to davidike.com/headlines, okay? More on that with David Icke tomorrow. He's with me tomorrow from 7 p.m. GMT. David is with me for the entire programme tomorrow. Make a note of that and do spread it around on social media. Paul Joseph Watson. Paul, who holds the enviable position even of Muppet-in-Chief at Infowars. There's a war on for your mind. You might have heard over the weekend Donald Trump naming Sweden, right, in a very bizarre monologue. Trump named Sweden as someplace overrun by Muslim bad behaviour. Don't know if you heard it. You probably did. In the event you didn't, it's short and sweet. This is what Trump had to say. Good old Donald.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible. You look at what's happening in Brussels. You look at what's happening all over the world. Take a look at Nice. Take a look at Paris. We've allowed thousands and thousands of people into our country, and there was no way to vet those people. There was no documentation. There was no nothing.
But Trump doesn't have a clue.
So we're going to keep our country
Trump
safe.
Doesn't have a clue, does he? Of course there was an agenda to overwhelm countries with mass migration. Of course there was. And of course there have been consequences. But it's not about what Trump is telling you. Or the aforementioned Paul Joseph Watson. It's far more complicated and sinister than that. Where the majority of the refugees fleeing places like Syria and elsewhere are genuine people. Yes, amongst those refugees it is planned that amongst those refugees will be dangerous people. No doubt about it. And it's also planned that the largely innocent body of women, men and children fleeing for their lives from the MI5, CIA and Mossad-created ISIS, those people will, of course, overwhelm vital public services in countries. This is absolutely true. But that's not what Trump is talking about. Trump is not talking about the real reason all of this is happening. So that's what he said anyway. Sweden, utterly bizarre. Now, Infowars, the White House Ministry of Propaganda, that's what Infowars is. That is what it is. It is nothing else. It has no integrity. It has no place amongst journalistic programs, current affairs programs. It is just a ministry of propaganda for the fascist Donald Trump. Why is that? Well, it rushes to the defense of Trump 50 to 60 times a day. That's not an exaggeration. Check them out. That's all it does now, Infowars. Scream bloody murder at any criticism of their fascist leader. So the gormless goon Watson today offered to pay for journalists to experience the beyond Thunderdome reality in Malmo. He tweeted, did Watson, and I read verbatim, any journalist claiming Sweden is safe, I will pay for travel costs and accommodation for you to stay in crime-ridden migrant suburbs of Malmo. Hundreds of people took him up on it. He went quiet for a bit. He was scratching his head thinking, Jesus, that wasn't a good idea. And then somebody, probably his master Jones, pulled his leash and said, Paul, you'd better pay for somebody to go over there. So Watson tweeted out later on, he's now spent £2,000. £2,000. $2,000 he spent sending one guy to Sweden and one guy only. Watson described him as a great journalist and unbiased. No pressure on the guy then to report back that Malmo was like Roadhouse. It's like Roadhouse. If only Patrick Swayze were still alive to clean up Malmo. Infowars, because there's a war on for your wallet. The truther industrial complex, monumental bullshit. Psychopathy, every day. Infowars.com. To a more serious story, Milo Yiannopoulos is in the news today. You might know Milo Yiannopoulos or Milo Yiannopoulos. He's the guy banned from Twitter for allegedly trolling one of the actresses in the recent Ghostbusters reboot. You might know about that, you might not. Now, Milo is a gay lad. He says it's important to mention he's gay. He says some interesting things about gender identity, I think, and gender politics. He's loud, he's camp, he's occasionally vulgar, but he's all right. I think he's pretty harmless. I've seen him on national TV here from time to time, and he looks a bit mad, but I think he's relatively harmless. Now, he was interviewed by Seth Rogen. I don't know how recent the interview was. I have no idea whether it was last week or last month, but something he said to Rogen in the interview has caused ructions today. So here's what Milo Yiannopoulos said to Seth Rogen. Listen carefully. Yeah, it normally works. Here we go. Let's try that again.
This is a controversial point of view I accept, but we get hung up on this this sort of child abuse stuff, and to the point where we're heavily policing even relationships between consenting adults, sort of grad students and professors at universities.
Right, so that's about the gist of what the Huffington Post and the Metro and a few other publications were getting at today. They said that it sounded as if Milo Yiannopoulos was basically normalising or attempting to normalise sexual relations between older men and younger men under the age of consent. Okay? That's what the big furore was about today. I suppose if you listen to that one way, you could take it like that. I think I'm not going to try and defend, and I did put out a call to Yiannopoulos today to invite him to come on the programme, either today or sometime in the future. But I understand he's a regular guest on Infowars, so it's unlikely he's going to come on this programme. But I extended an invitation to him, not just to talk about that, but to talk about censorship in general and identity politics. But I haven't heard back from him as of yet. Yeah, it's very, very worrying when anybody suggests that it's okay if it's consensual. So if the 14 or 15-year-old boy is happy with it and initiates it, it's okay. It isn't. It isn't okay. It's rape. But Yiannopoulos is not the first gay man to say this. It's been said many times over the years. They generally come back very quickly afterwards and say, well, look, I didn't mean that we should legalise it. What I'm saying is we shouldn't try to criminalise all of it. I remember speaking to Peter Tatchell about this years ago, and Peter said nobody should have sex with anybody under the age of consent. It shouldn't happen. What I used to campaign for, Peter said to me, was to take away the criminalisation of when you have a 15-year-old kid sleeping with a 17-year-old kid, or a 16-year-old kid sleeping with an 18-year-old kid, and it's consensual. Whether it's wrong or not, they shouldn't be prosecuted for it. At the time, that's what he was talking about at the time. I didn't agree with that, and I don't agree with it. So that's what Yiannopoulos was getting at, I think. It's sinister. I can understand the outrage expressed against it. But I'll tell you what was even more concerning than that, was something he said to Rogan later on. And this clip here is tragic, as much as it is concerning. It's incredibly sad. Have a listen to this.
I always think I would have made a good priest. Do you think I'd make a good priest?
Let me just stop right there. It just occurred to me. If you've got young children in the room, either turn the radio down for a couple of minutes or send them out of the room, because there's some very bad language in this next bit. I couldn't edit it out without completely taking away from the impact of what was being said. I just couldn't do that. So, and if I beeped out the swear words, you wouldn't have understood what was being said. So if you have children, I'm playing the clip now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is what he said, which I find very concerning.
I always think I would have made a good priest. Do you think I'd make a good priest? I think I'd make a good priest.
Well, you make a good priest if you think the guy that made you suck his dick was a good priest. That kind of good priest.
He was a great priest. Honestly, like he was. He was
good other than that?
I've never had a better singing tutor. He was great.
Singing teacher.
He got notes out of me I didn't even know I could produce.
Well, he worked your plumbing.
Shattering the chandeliers, kind of.
But was he good outside of what he did? Like, was he a good religious scholar? Was he a good teacher?
I think he was just a parish priest. I mean, I
just
really
a fucking creep getting his dick sucked then.
He's gonna get lynched now.
How's he gonna get lynched? Do people know who he is?
I don't think so.
What's his name?
Well, I'm not saying anymore.
Well, how old were you at the time? You were a little kid, and he was like what?
You're trying to.
Was he in his 20s or 30s?
Yet another feminist strategy that you have adopted in addition to your language policing.
Trying to out pedophiles?
No, trying to go on this.
You were the
witch,
one who was anti-pedophile earlier.
I told you it wasn't the pedophilia. I was after I lost my virginity. I was
how
in my
old were you?
teens. I was in my teens.
14.
I was in my teens.
You said you were 14.
Something like that.
That's what you said. 14 is pedophilia,
in my teens.
buddy.
He acknowledged that he was indeed 14 years old, and that's incredibly sinister. Because what he was describing there was a priest who was basically in charge of him. He was in the care of a priest at school. And when he was 14, he had sex with the priest. He was raped. And what's tragic for me about it is, and going way back to my days producing mid-morning talk shows on commercial radio and presenting shows on commercial radio, I've spoken over the years with many victims of sex abuse, and some of them, believe it or not, adopt the position that Yiannopoulos adopted, which was basically that he was up for it, basically. I was up for it. I was really, I was sexually charged at the time, and I was really into it, and it was consensual, and everything was fine. He didn't do anything wrong. That's a terrible thing, because the priest is a rapist and should have been prosecuted and should have went to prison for what he did to him. That's not what Yiannopoulos said earlier on about, late teen boys having romantic encounters with other late teen boys or slightly older guys. That's rape, that. And like I said before, if a 16-year-old has sex with a 19-year-old, the 19-year-old has broken the law. It's sexual abuse. He or she is in the position of authority and responsibility, and it should never happen. Should never happen. What a sinister, how screwed up is that young man to believe it was all right because I wanted it. Dreadful. How many other people who've been abused think like that, think like that. It's all about conditioning and control, isn't it? I suppose. I'm going to touch on these issues a little bit later on in the programme. Just thought I'd mention that today. And finally, for the moment then, I was going to do something about the Iranian foreign minister, but we'll leave that for now. Finally, for now, you might know that peers, the upper house, the peers, the lords, the ladies, have been debating, the decision to leave the European Union. They've been debating the Brexit bill in the House of Lords today. Okay. MPs have already backed the proposed law, which will give Theresa May, that is, the power to inform the EU of the UK's intention to leave, but it must pass the House of Lords. It doesn't have a majority. The government doesn't have a majority in the House of Lords. Apparently today, a record 190 peers are due to speak. The sitting has been extended to midnight. It's still going on. Opposition and crossbench peers are debating the merits and the demerits of May having the right to trigger Article 50. Lord Mandelson. Yeah, a lot I could say about him, but I won't say about him. Mandelson, following on from his good buddy Tony Blair and many others, mooted the possibility of a second referendum today.
This is not what a lot of Leave supporters backed when they voted in the referendum. Yes, they did want to leave the European Union, but they didn't want to turn Britain into a poorer, politically isolated offshore tax haven without reach or influence in the world. And once they see the consequences, my lords, they may, and I stress may, want to think again about the outcome of the government's chosen path. And Parliament's job will be to reflect that change of view and to create the means of expressing it.
Create the means of expressing it, which is another referendum.